Picture a kitchen the size of a ballroom. Now fill it with steam so thick you can barely see the person standing 3 feet away. Add the smell of boiled turnip and institutional fat, and something that used to be meat before the war got to it. Add 30 women moving between 6 burner ranges in a room that's 90 degrees even in February. Add the low, constant drone of anxiety that sits beneath every sound, every conversation, every quiet moment. The sound of people waiting for the sky to fall again. That's a British restaurant in London, 1943. Not a restaurant the way you're thinking. No tablecloths, no menus printed on card, no one asking whether you'd prefer your fish poached or grilled. A British restaurant is a government feeding centre, 144 of them in London alone, hundreds more across the country. They exist because the alternative is a city full of people who can't afford to eat on what rationing allows, and a government that has finally reluctantly admitted that if you want people to build aeroplanes and drive ambulances and dig out bomb sites at 3 a.m, those people need a hot meal at midday. The food is simple, deliberately simple, by law in fact. No meal can cost more than 1 shilling and 9pence. No meal can contain a second course that includes both meat and pastry. The gravy is always thin. The vegetables are always overcooked. The pudding, when there is pudding, is made of things you will spend years trying to forget. And yet, every single day, this kitchen feeds 400 people. 400 people who are cold and tired and frightened and hungry, who've been working since 6 a.m. at jobs that didn't exist 3 years ago. They come in clutching their coat collars, smelling of factory floor and damp wool, and they sit down at bare wooden tables and someone puts a plate in front of them. That someone is you. You're 19 years old. You've been here for 8 months. You arrive from a village in Yorkshire with 1 suitcase and a letter of introduction written in your aunt's cramped handwriting. And you've spent every day since then learning what it means to feed people when there is almost nothing left to feed them with. So, get comfortable. If you're listening to this to sleep, wonderful. If you're listening because the inside of your head is too loud and you need something to fill it, same. Either way, here we go. Your eyes open in the dark. For a second, half a second, you're in your bedroom in Harrogate. You're 12 years old. It's Saturday morning. Your mother is downstairs and the smell coming through the floor is bacon. Real bacon. Thick rashers crackling in a cast iron pan, the fat rendering down, the salt hitting hot metal. Then the smell hits you. Not bacon. This isn't the smell of a kitchen making something delicious. This is the smell of a kitchen that has been making functional food under industrial pressure for months. A smell that has saturated the walls and the ceiling and the floor and your hair and quite possibly your soul. Grease first, not the good kind. The rendered animal fat you use for everything. Roasting, frying, pastry making, that sits in big grey tins and smells faintly of the rendering works across the river. It coats every surface. The hobs, the oven doors, the underside of every shelf. It coats you too, if you're honest. A thin film that no amount of carbolic soap fully removes. Under the grease, boiled cabbage, which would be fine if it were today's cabbage. It's yesterday's cabbage, and the day before's. The smell of cooked brassica is democratic. It doesn't care how much time has passed. It just persists, like the war, like the queuing, like the low hum of exhaustion that has become your generation's background frequency. Under the cabbage, something chemical. The bleach they mop the floors with every night. Strong enough to strip the colour from fabric if you're not careful, and you've lost 2 aprons to it already. Great ghostly patches faded to nothing. You don't mention this to anyone, and underneath all of it, the layer you only notice when you've been away for a few days and come back, the smell of the building itself. Old stone, damp plaster, the particular cold dampness of a building that was a school hall before the war requisitioned it, that has Victorian ventilation designed for 30 children rather than 400 lunches. The smell of a place that was never meant to be this, and has never quite adjusted to being it. Welcome to the British Restaurant on Bermondsey Wall West, Southwark, London. October 1943. You're lying on a narrow bed in a room you share with 2 other women. Mabel is sleeping with her face turned toward the wall, her shoulders rising and falling in the slow rhythm of someone who needs sleep more than they're getting. Joan is already up. You can hear her moving in the tiny bathroom down the hall, water running. The particular sound of someone trying to get ready quickly and quietly at the same time. Your lodgings are above a hardware shop on a street that still has gaps in it where houses used to be. Not big gaps, just spaces. The rubble has been cleared. The sites have been fenced off with timber boards and warnings, but you can see from the window at the end of the hall 3 lots that were front gardens this time 2 years ago, and are now just flat ground, slightly too rectangular with weeds coming through the frost. You don't look at them anymore, or rather you look at them without seeing them. This is something you've learned to do in London. Selective not seeing. How to hold your gaze at street level and not let it drift upward to where the skyline is wrong. How to cross a road without cataloguing what used to be on the other side. Mabel calls it the London Eye, not the romantic kind, the kind that learns not to count the absences. The alarm hasn't gone off yet, but you're already awake. You've been waking before it for 3 months. Your body has decided that 5:45 is simply when you wake now, alarm or no alarm. It has given up the argument. You lie still for another 30 seconds. This is your luxury, your one extravagance in a life that has been systematically stripped of them. 30 seconds of lying still, looking at the water stain on the ceiling, shaped, if you tilt your head, roughly like a hair, and not yet being a person who has to do anything. Then the alarm, and you get up. The floor is cold. The linoleum is cold. Your feet find your slippers in the dark. You keep them in exactly the same spot every night, and you move to the window and look out. London in the blackout, or rather, London lifting out of the blackout. It's October, so the mornings are still dark enough to matter, but it's 6 in the morning now, and the sky to the east is beginning to do something indecisive. Not dawn, not yet. More like the sky clearing its throat. The street below is empty except for a milkman making his rounds, the horse's breath fogging in the cold air, the glass bottles chinking with every cobblestone. The horse knows the route better than the milkman does. You've watched it stop at houses without being told, stand patient and unasked, while the man takes 2 steps back to the cart, retrieves the bottle, places it on the step. An old routine, a normal routine, something that keeps happening because it has always happened, and some things are stubborn enough to keep happening, even when everything else has stopped. You dress in the dark because the electricity isn't worth wasting. Wool stockings, rough against your legs, vest, shirt, your second best skirt because your best one is being kept for Sunday or important events, neither of which seem to be approaching. Your work clothes are already at the restaurant. Your whites, your apron. What you're wearing now is just transport. the clothes that get you from here to there, cardigan, 2 of them. The heating at the restaurant is violent and you'll be dripping within 20 minutes of arrival, but the journey there is 17 minutes in the cold, and the cold in London in October is not the same cold as Yorkshire. Yorkshire cold is honest. It comes from the moors, big and open, and it hits you fair. London cold comes up from the river, and the bombed gaps in the street grid where the wind finds channels it never had before, and it is sneaking and persistent and gets into the spaces between your clothing in a way that is almost personal. You are not yet warm. You will not be properly warm until Mrs. Hartley turns on the ovens, and the ovens will not go on until 6:30, and it is not yet 6. But you are moving, which is something. Breakfast before you leave is what it always is. Your ration of bread, 2 slices because you've worked out the arithmetic of your ration book down to the day, spread with a thin scrape of margarine, not butter. Margarine. The butter ration is 4 ounces per person per week, which sounds manageable until you do the maths. 4 ounces is roughly a quarter of a standard pre-war block, and that has to last 7 days, which means you're rationed to just under 19 grams per day, which is roughly the butter equivalent of filling a thimble. You use it for cooking, the margarine is for bread. A cup of tea with the allowed measure of milk, 1/3 of a pint per day, shared between 3 women, which means Joan, who gets up earliest, always takes slightly more than her share, because she makes the first pot and nobody has said anything about this in 8 months. And you suspect nobody will, because the energy required to say something is energy that could go somewhere else. No sugar in the tea. Sugar is 8 ounces per person per week, roughly 2 teaspoons per day. And you gave up sugar in beverages in March because you calculated that 16 teaspoons were worth more as actual sugar for baking than as flavour in liquid you drink and forget. You make this calculation every time you pour tea, every single time, without fail. This is what rationing does to you. It makes arithmetic automatic. It turns eating into a constant low-level management problem. You never simply eat anything anymore. You calculate it. You portion it. You weigh it with your eyes even when there's no scale present. You think about this sometimes. What it will be like when the war is over. When there is food again. Actual food. When you can eat a piece of cake and not instantly translate it into ration units in your head. You wonder if that reflex will ever go. If it will just be something you carry now, like a wound that heals over but leaves a scar. You eat your bread standing up looking out of the kitchen window. The milkman's horse is gone. The street is still empty. You rinse your cup. Get your coat. Get your bag. Check automatically that you have your identity card. You've never actually been stopped and asked for it, but you've been not carrying it exactly once, and spent the entire day with a low-grade anxiety that felt out of all proportion to the actual risk, and you've never made that mistake again. Lock the door. Into the cold. The walk to the restaurant takes you down 2 residential streets, past the bombed spaces, across a larger road where a bus goes past twice before you reach the other side, the number 47, heading toward London Bridge, and through a small market street where the fruit and vegetable stall is already being set up by a man who looks like he'd rather be asleep. You know this man. His name is Terry. He has a son in North Africa and a daughter in the WAAF. And a wife who works at the munitions factory in Woolwich, and every morning without fail he's here at 6 in the morning putting out trays of vegetables that will be mostly sold by 9. "Morning, Agnes," he says without looking up. "Morning, Terry. Got your carrots yesterday, the big delivery." Lovely, you say, and mean it. Carrots are, this is your life now, genuinely exciting. You've become a person for whom a large delivery of root vegetables is exciting news. Parsnips too, if you want them. How many? Say £40 for you if you'll take them. I'll tell Mrs. Hartley. Do that. I'm sick of looking at them. You keep walking. The restaurant sits on the corner, a former school hall whose large windows have been half blacked out. Not with the permanent blackout boards which come out at night, but with a kind of institutional grimness that has settled over the building like sediment. The windows that are clear are the kind of glass that lets in light without letting you see through it cleanly. Everything visible from outside is slightly blurred, slightly uncertain. But there is light inside, and before you've even reached the door you can smell it. The ovens are already on. Mrs. Dorothy Hartley has been head cook at this restaurant since it opened in October 1940. She was 51 then. She is 54 now, and she moves through the kitchen with the particular authority of a woman who's been in charge of a functioning operation through 3 years of conditions that would have destroyed a lesser person. She is not tall. She is not large. She has grey hair kept pinned so severely it seems structural, and a face that contains, depending on the situation, exactly the expression required and no more. When a delivery is wrong, her face is the kind of still that makes the delivery man stammer. When something goes right, a pudding that comes out clean, a new recipe that stretches the rations further than expected, her face does something that is not quite a smile, but contains all the components of one in compressed form. She has never praised you directly. What she has done is stop correcting you on certain things, which in Mrs. Hartley's economy of communication functions as high commendation. She grew up in service, went into a big house at 14 as a kitchen maid, worked her way up through scullery maid, cook's assistant, undercook, finally cook. Left service in 1924 when she married. Spent 15 years cooking for her family and for occasional local events, church suppers and that sort of thing. When her husband died in 1938, heart attack, sudden, nothing to be done, she was left with a house and a skill and no income. The war solved that, in the way the war solved certain problems for certain people, while catastrophically creating them for others. She has never told you any of this directly. You've assembled it from fragments. A comment here, a detail there, the photograph on her desk, a man in a garden, shirt sleeves, squinting at the sun, that she's never explained but that sits in a position of enough prominence to be important. What she's told you directly is this. Agnes, food feeds people. That's the first thing to know. Not nourishes them, not pleasures them, feeds them, keeps them upright, keeps them moving. Your job is to keep 400 people upright and moving every single day. The rest is craft, and craft can be learned. You have been learning it. By the time you get your whites on and your apron tied, the kitchen is already moving. There are 11 people on the morning shift. Yourself and Joan, who, despite the tea situation you like, and 9 others, a mix of ages and backgrounds united by the particular solidarity of people who've been in a hot room together under pressure for long enough that personality differences start to matter less than competence. You know each other the way soldiers in a trench know each other, you imagine. Not always well, but completely. Phyllis is on the stock pot. She's 40, heavy, with forearms that could arm wrestle most men, and she's been making stock since 5 in the morning. The stock is everything. Without it, the food is inedible. With it, Even the most skeletal of meat allocations becomes something that can, with patience and salt, and whatever herbs the garden out back has managed to produce this season, function as gravy. The stock is bones today. It's almost always bones. The restaurants get their meat allocation in bones when the whole joints run out, which they do by midday Tuesday in most weeks. The bones go in the stock pot with whatever vegetable scraps were left from the previous day, and the stock pot simmers for 12 hours, and by lunchtime what comes out is thin but flavourful enough to save the food. Phyllis is stirring it now, a long-handled paddle moving through the dark liquid with the steady rhythm of someone who's been doing it long enough to do it without thinking. The steam rises from the pot in heavy curtains. Her face, turned toward you for a second, is pink with heat. Bones gave up something decent today, she says. There's marrow in these ones. This is good news. Marrow flavours the stock in a way that vegetables can't replicate. Mrs. Hartley, no. She's the one who sorted them last night. Made sure we got the right batch. You nod. Of course she did. Mrs. Hartley sorts the bones. The kitchen is roughly 60 feet long and 30 feet wide. High ceiling, school hall proportions, which in summer is a mercy and in winter is a cruelty, because all the heat the ovens generate rises straight up and pools somewhere above your head where it's no use to you at all. 6 ranges, 3 on each side, heavy iron things that predate the war by several decades and run on coke. The coke allocation, like everything else, is rationed. Mrs. Hartley has made an art form of using it efficiently, understanding exactly how long you can coast on residual heat before adding more fuel, understanding the particular personality of each range. Number 3 runs hot on the left side. Number 5's front burner is reliable, but the back one lies about its temperature. The way a musician understands the temperament of a particular instrument. Between the ranges, the preparation tables, solid, scarred, bleached white, carrying decades of cuts and stains and the ghost of 10,000 meals. This is where you work most of the morning. Chopping, peeling, measuring, mixing. Hands in perpetual motion because there's no point at which the work pauses long enough to stop. At the far end, the serving counter. 8 feet long, with heat lamps that don't work half the time. This is where the food goes at 12 o'clock, and from 12 until 2, there will be a queue out the door and down the street and possibly around the corner, and the food has to last all of it. At 400 servings per day, you're feeding roughly 20 times what the kitchen was designed for. The school it used to be sent 50 children home for lunch. You feed 400 adults in 2 hours. This is not a small engineering problem. By 7 o'clock, Mrs. Hartley has gathered you and Joan and a woman named Ruth at the end preparation table for what she calls the morning accounting. This is not technically an accounting. There are no ledgers here, no adding machines. What it is, Mrs. Hartley places on the table everything that has come in from this week's allocation, and together you look at it, and you work out how to make it into food for 400 people, and the exercise is simultaneously practical arithmetic and something closer to a kind of desperate creativity. On the table today, a joint of beef, 12 pounds. This sounds, on its own, almost generous, but 12 pounds of beef divided by 400 servings is 0.03 pounds per person, just under half an ounce. The joint is also not particularly well butchered, because the good cuts go elsewhere, and what ends up here has more bone in it than the figure suggests. 14 pounds of potatoes. This is the main carbohydrate, and it would be fine if potatoes were the only carbohydrate. but they're also the only vegetable in reliable supply, so they're doing double duty, and £14 for 400 people is, you do this automatically, about £0.035 per serving. Just over half an ounce. Root vegetables in various states of freshness. You're thinking about Terry's parsnips. Mrs. Hartley is too. She catches your eye when she reaches this part of the list. Terry at the market has £40 of parsnips. He mentioned. Pause. Are they good? Yesterday's delivery of his carrots was sound enough. Then yes. Joan, go by before 9. Tell him we'll take them all. Dried lentils, £6. These will go into soup, which stretches everything. A pound of lentils can become 12 bowls of soup if you're willing to be aggressive about it. Mrs. Hartley's always willing to be aggressive about it. Margarine, £8. Sounds like a lot until you account for pastry, frying, sauce, and the thin scrape that goes on bread at tea time. Dried egg powder, 2 tins. Dried eggs are the particular indignity of wartime cooking. They reconstitute into something that resembles egg in roughly the way that a sketch resembles a photograph. The relationship is clear, but the soul is missing. You can make them work in baking. You can make them work in omelettes if you are sufficiently determined. You cannot make them work in anything that requires them to behave like eggs, rather than like egg-adjacent substance. Sugar, £4 for the pudding and the bread. Flour, £20. And that's it. That's what you have. Main soup, Mrs. Hartley says, and she says it the way a general says take that hill. No doubt, no hesitation, just information. Braised beef, stretch it with the lentils in the gravy, potato and parsnip roast, soup from the stock with whatever we trim from the vegetables, suet pudding for the sweet 4 ounces each. You look at the quantities on the table, you look at Mrs. Hartley. It'll reach, she says. It's always reached. This is the sentence you have heard every single morning since you arrived. It's always reached. You used to find it implausible. Now you know it to be true in the way you know certain other improbable things to be true. That the stock always has more left in it than you thought. That 400 people eating institutional food eat it faster than you'd expect. That waste, which Mrs. Hartley treats as a kind of moral failing slightly above theft on the scale of sins, is so minimal in this kitchen that it has essentially ceased to exist. It'll reach. You pick up a knife and start peeling. Peeling potatoes for 400 people is one of those tasks that sounds simple and is, in fact, a particular kind of purgatory. The potatoes are not good potatoes. Good potatoes, pre-war potatoes, the kind that came in with the thin skin that almost came off if you rubbed them, that you could smell the earth on, those are a memory. What you have are field potatoes, large and irregular and dirty, with deep-set eyes and patches of green at the shoulders that have to be cut out entirely because the green contains solanine, which Mrs. Hartley has explained at length, and while you've never actually seen anyone poisoned by a green potato, you've developed a personal animosity toward them. You peel with your right hand and hold with your left, turning the potato with practiced efficiency, the blade angle just slightly, taking a thin enough strip to save what you can, but thick enough to get through the skin in one pass. The peelings curl away in long ribbons onto the newspaper spread beneath your work surface. The newspaper is the Daily Mirror from last Thursday. There is a story about Montgomery visible through the potato peelings. You register this without reading it. Your hands are cold at the start. By the 3rd potato they've warmed. By the 20th they're at full working temperature. finding their rhythm, moving with the smooth mechanical ease of something that has been done enough times to bypass the part of the brain that requires concentration. Your fingers know what to do. They've known for months. The other women are doing the same thing, or close to it. Joan is breaking down the beef joint, a task that requires a different skill, and Joan has it. The knife finding the joins in the meat the way water finds a crack in stone. Ruth is measuring out lentils, the dried pulse rattling against the measuring bowl in quick, dry percussion. They're saying it might frost tonight, Phyllis calls from the stock pot. It was cold this morning, you say. Going to be a hard winter. We're going to be a hard winter, Joan says without looking up. Same as last one. Nobody disagrees. They were hard winters. They've all been hard. There's a particular quality to winter in wartime London. Not just the cold, but the cold on top of everything else. The cold added to the blackout, added to the rationing, added to the anxiety. All of it layered like geological strata, each year depositing another thin band of endurance onto whatever was there before. My mother sent a parcel, Ruth says, from Devon. Actual butter. 6 ounces. There is a small silence around this information that functions as a collective recognition of its significance. Actual butter, Phyllis repeats. Real butter from their cow. She has a cow. Had one before the war. Kept it. A pause. I didn't tell anyone. Is that terrible? Absolutely not, says Joan, and the warmth in her voice is immediate and genuine. You eat every ounce of it and don't tell a soul. You keep peeling. 6 ounces of butter. Your mind does the calculation automatically. 6 ounces is a week and a half's ration. Your mother sent a week and a half of butter in a parcel, and it's crossing the country in a train somewhere right now, and Ruth is going to eat it. Maybe on bread, maybe just by the spoonful, and this information has made everyone in the kitchen slightly happier. You don't have a cow. You don't have parents with a cow. Your parents have a terraced house in Harrogate and a small garden and a father who does the accounts for a solicitor's office. They are not cow people. They are not people who have extra butter. But the story about Ruth's mother's butter, that's still something. It still helps, somehow. Proof that somewhere outside London, outside the restaurant, outside the careful mathematics of 400 meals a day, there are cows in fields, there is butter in parcels, there are mothers who send things. You keep peeling. Mrs. Hartley comes to stand beside you at 7:15. She does this sometimes, not to supervise, not to correct, but simply to work beside you, picking up her own peeling knife, taking a potato from the pile, joining the rhythm. This is how she teaches, not lectures, not instructions, side by side. Suet pudding, she says. Yes. The recipe I gave you, how far does it go? You run the arithmetic in your head, the way she's taught you to do it, without reaching for a piece of paper. 12 ounces of flour, 3 ounces of suet, a tablespoon of sugar, water. Makes a pudding for, depending on how thick you roll it, 8 to 12 portions. And we need 400, so 34 to 36 batches. And our flour allocation today, 20 pounds, so 320 ounces, divided by 12 ounces per batch, 26 batches, Mrs. Hartley says quietly, which is how many portions. You feel the calculation shifting, the space between what you have and what you need becoming visible. Between 208 and 312 portions, if we roll it thin, which we will, which isn't 400. No, she doesn't look up. So what else do we do? This is the real lesson. This is what she's been teaching you for 8 months. Bread, you say. Extra bread portion at the side. No butter, but bread. And we make the main course portions generous enough that the lack of pudding feels, you search for the word, compensated for, Mrs. Hartley says. Not compensated. Compensated for. People need to feel that they have received enough. If the main is filling, the missing pudding is forgivable. If the main is thin and the pudding's absent, you have 400 people leaving hungry and angry people don't come back. She peels her potato in 3 long strokes. Perfect efficiency. And they come back, she says. They always come back. That's your measure. Not the food critic's opinion. Not the health inspector's form. Are they coming back tomorrow? That's how you know. They come back. 400 of them, every single day. Because somewhere in this building, between the bones and the parsnips and the dried egg and the suet, there is food. Real food. Hot food. Food that was made with attention. That's what you're doing. That's what you've been doing. You put the peeled potato in the pot and pick up another one. By 8 o'clock, the kitchen has reached what you think of as its working temperature. Not the temperature of the air, which is already uncomfortable, but the emotional temperature. The point at which everyone has stopped being a person who has just woken up and become a person who is in the middle of making lunch. The beef is in the braising pot with onions, small ones carefully halved, and the bones from the stock pot, the marrow-rich ones Phyllis set aside, and a measure of the stock itself, and whatever herbs came in from the little garden. Rosemary, a few sprigs of thyme. The garden is a small miracle in itself, a section of the bombed lot next door that Mrs. Hartley organised to be cleared and planted in the spring of 1941, and which has, since then, produced herbs every year, modest amounts but consistent, and which costs nothing in rations. The braising pot goes into the oven. Number 2 oven, which Mrs. Hartley uses for long, slow cooking, because it runs slightly cooler than its dial suggests and will not destroy what's inside. The smell changes immediately. The institutional grease-and-boiled vegetable background begins to be overlaid with something better. The smell of meat cooking in liquid, of herbs opening in heat, of something that is actually approaching appetizing. "Smells good," says Joan from across the kitchen. "Doesn't it?" Mrs. Hartley says, and she means it. At 9:30, Mrs. Hartley sends you to the market. This is, admit it, the best part of most mornings. Not because you enjoy running errands, but because the market means leaving the kitchen for an hour, means walking through streets where the air, despite everything, is less dense than the kitchen air, means brief contact with people whose lives are not entirely organised around the feeding of 400 strangers. Your shopping list lives in your coat pocket. You know most of it by heart. Parsnips, £40. Terry, if they're good, check them first. Any remaining green vegetables he has. The butcher at number 12 has been holding back a pound of dripping for Mrs. Hartley since Monday. Collect it. Check whether the grocer has received the dried milk delivery he promised. If there are any eggs, actual eggs, not dried, buy whatever the ration allows. The last item on the list is the least likely to be fulfilled. Actual eggs have become a kind of mythology. They exist. People describe them with the nostalgic reverence usually reserved for places they visited once and will never see again. You yourself have not cooked with a real egg since June. The dried powder reconstitutes. It cooks. It is not an egg. You put on your coat, wrap your scarf, wool, starting to go at one end where you've been unconsciously pulling at it. and go outside. The market is 3 streets away. The route takes you past a chemist's with its window board still up from last night's blackout, a newsagent whose billboard reads Monty Confident in push. But you don't stop to read which push, because there's always a push somewhere, and confidence is always being attributed to Monty. Past the WVS canteen, mobile, set up on the corner every morning, mostly serving workers and ARP men, where a woman you know slightly is handing out cups of tea and a man in a warden's helmet is telling her something she appears not to believe, and then past the gap. It's a big gap on this street. Not one house, 3. The facades are still standing. That happens sometimes, the structural deception of a terrace that looks intact until you look through the window hole and see sky. But behind them is nothing. Just rubble that has been partially cleared, and beneath the rubble the remnants of someone's things, still partly visible if you stand at the fence and look hard enough. A piece of floral wallpaper, a door frame, painted blue. The upended corner of something that might have been a kitchen cabinet, open like a broken jaw. Number 14, 16, and 18, Pomeroy Street, September 1940. You didn't know the people. You arrived after. But you know the building now the way you know any gap, as a presence shaped like an absence, as a space where the street's logic has been interrupted and not yet repaired. You don't stop. Nobody stops. You just keep walking. Terry is at his stall and the parsnips are good. You lift one and press it. Firm, heavy for its size, the skin tight. You smell the cut end of another where he's broken one to show you the interior. White and clean, not hollow, not bitter smelling. How much for the lot? Told you. £40 for the restaurant. Same as always. Mrs. Hartley says to ask if he'll throw in those leeks. You nod toward a small wooden box at the back of the stall. The ones that are going to turn if he doesn't sell them today. Terry looks at the leeks, looks at you. She sent a child to do this, did she? She sent me. You're 19. I'm aware. He's not actually annoyed. This is a performance. You've done this enough times to know the shape of it. The leeks, fine. But tell her those are good leeks, not charity leeks. I'm not running a charity. The outer leaves have gone soft, but the heart is sound on every one of them. I'll tell her. 6pence. I'll tell her that too. You collect the parsnips in the net bag you brought. £40 is heavy. It will take 2 trips or you'll do your back. And leave the leeks for the second trip while you go to the butcher. The butcher is a man named Bernard who has the resigned air of someone who has spent 3 years of professional life explaining to people why there isn't more meat. He gives you the dripping, a full pound of it, wrapped in paper that's slightly translucent with grease, and tells you he might have offal next week. What kind? Liver, if the delivery holds. Maybe kidneys. Mrs. Hartley will want to know how much. Tell her I'm thinking £8-10 if she'll take it on a Thursday. I'll tell her. Offal is unrationed. This is the logic of wartime food policy. The things people find least appealing are the things that remain available without restriction, because demand for them never exceeds supply even in normal times, and in wartime a pound of liver will do more nutritional work per shilling than almost anything with a ration number attached to it. Mrs. Hartley has made peace with offal. She has in fact developed a respect for it that borders on advocacy. Liver's got more iron than beef, she told you once, slicing through a pale slab of it with the quiet efficiency of someone who has long since stopped being squeamish about anything. More vitamins. It's not fashionable because fashionable food isn't about what you need, it's about what signals who you are. In a restaurant like ours, we don't care about signals. We care about iron. You care about iron. You've started caring about iron. This is what working for Mrs. Hartley does to you. The walk back with, the shopping takes longer than the walk out. You have 40 pounds of parsnips in the bag, a pound of dripping tucked under your arm, and the leeks balanced awkwardly on top. Your arms are telling you about it by the time you reach the first corner. The cold isn't helping. Your fingers, despite the gloves, have found a temperature somewhere between functional and complaining, and the bag's rope handle is cutting into your palm. You stop to shift the weight, readjust, breathe. From here, standing at the corner of the market street, you can see south toward the river and past the river, just barely visible through the morning haze. The dome, St. Paul's. You can't always see it. Some mornings the fog off the Thames swallows everything above 3 stories. But this morning is clear enough, and there it is. The dome rising above everything else on the skyline, pale grey in the October light, enormous even at this distance, unchanged. You know, because everyone knows, about the photographs from the Blitz. December 1940, the night of the Great Fire Raid, the night the city burned, and somewhere in all that orange and black St. Paul's stood. The image on the front page of the newspapers the next morning, the dome surrounded by smoke and fire, somehow intact, had become something people needed without entirely being able to explain why. Not because it was particularly important to them personally. Most of the women you work with are not regular churchgoers. Not because it's the most beautiful building in London, though it is beautiful, impossibly beautiful for a building so old. Because it was still there. Because something was still there. You look at it for a moment longer than you mean to, the dome pale and solid against the grey sky. Then you hitch the bag back up and keep walking. Back in the kitchen by 10, and the machine has shifted into its second gear. The braising beef has been pulled from the oven, the liquid basting down over the meat in dark, shining rivulets when you lift the lid. The smell when you lift the lid is genuinely good. Not good in relation to wartime standards good, but actually good. The herbs and the marrow and the slow heat have done something real. Mrs. Hartley comes to look. She takes a spoon, lifts a measure of the braising liquid, tastes it with the focused attention of someone who is not tasting for pleasure but for information. Needs salt, she says. More than I put in? More than you put in. You're conservative with salt, Agnes. It doesn't seem right, with everything else rationed. Salt isn't rationed. Salt you can use. When the butter is rationed and the sugar is rationed and the meat is rationed, salt is how you make food taste like something. Use it. She hands you the spoon. You taste. She's right. The salt she adds makes the liquid taste three-dimensional rather than flat. The herbs come forward. The beef flavour, thin as it is given the proportions, becomes something that announces itself. Yes, you say. Good. Now add more. You add more. The parsnips go onto the trays with the potatoes, dressed with what you're allowed of the dripping. A thin film, the fat spread with a brush across the cut surfaces and into the hot ovens. The leeks are trimmed and washed and added to the soup base, the stock, enriched by its morning reduction, now carrying the flavour of the vegetables you've been chopping since 7, where they'll cook down to a softness that is, if you're honest, preferable in a soup to the crunch they'd have raw. The suet pudding is another matter. Suet pudding is technically simple. Flour, suet, sugar, water, steam or bake. But in practice, at scale, It is one of those tasks where small errors compound. Too wet and it's dense and gluey. Too dry and it crumbles on the plate and looks like failure. The suet itself, the hard fat around the kidneys, in pre-war kitchens but now a processed block from the grocer's, has to be cut fine enough to distribute through the flour, but not so fine it melts before the mixture comes together. You are on pudding. This is a responsibility. Mrs. Hartley could put Phyllis on pudding. Phyllis has been here longer, but she put you on pudding this week, and you're aware of this as the statement it is. You measure the flour, weigh the suet on the kitchen scale, the scale's arm swinging to its balance point. Cut the suet in with your fingertips, working quickly so the warmth of your hands doesn't soften it before it mixes. The feeling under your fingers is waxy, slightly resistant, the fat breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces as you work, until the mixture resembles something between sand and gravel, coarse and slightly damp smelling. Sugar, 2 tablespoons per batch. The sugar dissolves against your wet fingers as you measure it in, and for a moment, just a moment, the kitchen smells sweet, properly sweet, the brief sweetness of something before it's cooked. Then water, cold water, added gradually, a tablespoon at a time, mixing with a fork, testing the texture. You're looking for the moment when the mixture comes together without being sticky. The moment when it would hold a shape if you pressed it but wouldn't stick to your hands. It's tactile knowledge. Your hands know what they're looking for before your eyes do. There. By 11 o'clock the kitchen has reached its final gear. This is the gear where everything is on its trajectory, and your job is to monitor, to adjust, to catch the things that are going wrong before they complete the process of going wrong. The soup is on, the roasting vegetables are in the ovens, the puddings are in their tins, a row of them in the steam rack over the largest pot, filling the top of the kitchen with a secondary heat that hits you when you walk under it like stepping into a different room. The beef, once braised to softness, has been pulled apart, the proper cuts of meat retrieved and sliced, the more structural portions pulled and shredded, everything mixed back together in the gravy, so that each serving has both texture and flavour, and the proportional sleight of hand is less obvious. You taste everything. This is part of the job. Tasting, adjusting. The parsnips need another 10 minutes and more heat. The soup needs another pinch of salt and perhaps a bay leaf from the herbs at the window. The puddings are steaming properly. You can tell by the rhythm of the sound from the pot. A steady, confident burble rather than the sluggish sound that means insufficient heat. This is, in some way you haven't fully articulated, satisfying, not happy, not joyful. The kitchen is too hot and too loud and your feet hurt and you've been on them since 6. But there is a deep, functional satisfaction in the monitoring of many moving parts, in knowing what each thing needs before it can tell you, in the moment when you can look at a kitchen in full production and understand precisely the state of everything in it. Mrs. Hartley is doing the same, but from a different angle, more managerial, less physical, standing at the pass between kitchen and service, and watching the incoming flow of the morning's work with the focused calm of someone doing calculations in their head. She glances at you. Agnes. Yes. Good morning. Coming from Mrs. Hartley at 11 o'clock during the final hour before service, good morning is a complete assessment. You feel your face do something slightly involuntary. Thank you, you say. The doors open at 12, and the queue has been there since 11:45. You can't see it from the kitchen, but you know it. You've seen it enough times. It stretches from the service entrance along the side of the building and around onto the street, and by noon it will reach the corner. Men in work clothes, factory overalls, delivery uniforms, the practical dark clothing of people who spend their days doing physical things, women in headscarves, some with young children at their sides, office workers still in their day wear, slightly more formally dressed but just as tired, ARP wardens coming off morning shifts still in parts of their uniform, occasionally a soldier, the khaki of the army or the RAF blue incongruous in the queue's civilian majority. They queue with patience. This is, you've come to think, one of the underrated dignities of this particular time, the queuing. 400 people standing in the October cold, waiting for food they're going to eat off institutional crockery at institutional tables in a repurposed school hall, and doing it with a kind of wordless mutual courtesy that you find genuinely moving, especially when you think about how many of them have been standing in queues since early morning for their other shopping and will be standing in more queues after lunch. The queue is not complaining, not usually. Today a man near the front is complaining, you discover, because his complaint is loud enough to carry into the kitchen, where you can hear it in fragments between the kitchen noise. Something about the gravy last time, about the amount of gravy, about having a word with someone about the gravy. Let him have a word, Phyllis says, not looking up from her work. He'll have a word with Mrs. Hartley, Joan says, and then he won't have any more words. This is true. Service itself, the 2 hours between 12 and 2, is a different kind of work from the morning. The morning is creative, in the sense that you're making something. The afternoon is mechanical, in the sense that you're executing something already made. But the mechanicalness of it is deceptive, because the thing being executed is not just food. It is, in a way that Mrs. Hartley has never spelled out but you've absorbed, a transaction with people who need something more than calories. You learn to read the queue. The man who comes in every day alone always takes the seat by the window, always eats fast and leaves fast, working through his lunch break, eating in isolation because the alternative is not eating. The two older women who come in together and sit at the same table every day and appear to be continuing a conversation that has been going for years. The factory worker who comes in with the same two workmates and always takes the 3 servings with the most gravy, and when you ladle his, he looks at the plate with the specific attention of someone for whom this meal is the most reliable thing in their day. You think about this. You've thought about this a lot. These are not people who are here because they enjoy the food. They are here because the food is here, because you made it, because on a scale of certainties in an uncertain time, this place, this kitchen, this queue has proven itself reliable. You can come here, there will be food, it will be hot, it will be enough. That's the promise. Every single day, it'll reach. The man who had words about the gravy turns out to be a man named Walter, who works at the foundry 2 streets away and who's been coming here since the restaurant opened, and who is, once he stops complaining about the gravy and gets past the particular English difficulty of backing down from a complaint you've now committed to, actually a fairly decent person. Mrs. Hartley speaks to him briefly, quietly at the end of his meal. You can't hear what she says, but you can see the shape of it. Calm acknowledgement, brief explanation, firm but not unkind conclusion. He listens, he nods, he says something. She says something back. He leaves with his coat buttoned up and his expression reset into something that looks, if not quite satisfied, then at least no longer aggrieved. Mrs. Hartley returns to the kitchen and does not mention it. At 1:20, near the end of service, a young man comes in alone. He's in uniform. Army. A private, you think, based on the absence of stripes, though you're not reliable on rank. He's young, your age or close to it, with a face that's doing something complicated. The kind of complicated you recognise from people who are in the last few hours of something and know it. He takes his tray, takes his plate, the main, soup, bread. Sits at the corner table away from the groups. He doesn't eat immediately. He just looks at the food for a moment. His hands are flat on the table on either side of the tray, and he looks at the plate the way people look at things they're memorising. Joan notices. You see her notice from across the serving counter, and you see her face do its own complicated thing for a second before she goes back to serving. After a minute, he picks up his fork and starts eating. He eats slowly, deliberately, as though he's decided to be thorough about it. You're busy. You have 40 people still in the queue, and the gravy is running low and the parsnips in the back need to come out right now. You do not have time to be standing here watching a young soldier eat his lunch. But you notice him in your peripheral vision for the rest of his meal. Notice the way he sits, the economy of his movements, the particular stillness of someone who is paying attention to something invisible. He finishes. He stacks his plates neatly, the way you've asked people to by the posted sign, though most of them don't bother. He picks up his cap from the table. He buttons his coat. He stops at the counter on the way out. "Excuse me," he says. "You're already halfway through." Reaching for the next plate in the stack. You stop. "Yes?" "The soup." He pauses, as though selecting words from a limited supply. "It was really good." You look at him. He's perfectly serious. "Thank you," you say. That means thank you. He nods, puts on his cap, walks out. Joan appears at your shoulder almost immediately. "Train from Waterloo at 3, she says quietly. "That's my guess." You don't answer. You pick up the next plate, but the soup. Phyllis's stock, coaxed from bones and scraps and 12 hours of slow heat, seasoned with the precision Mrs. Hartley taught you. A young man going wherever they're sending him next, sitting in a corner with his hands flat on the table, memorising it. It was really good. You're going to think about this for a long time. Service ends at 2. The last stragglers are out by 1:15, and then the dining room belongs to you for 45 minutes, while the afternoon shift wipes down the tables, stacks the chairs, and begins the transition to tea service at 4. In the kitchen, the great clearing of the midday service. Every surface has to be washed down, every pot scrubbed. The roasting trays, thickened now with the residue of parsnips and potatoes at high heat, require significant effort, a physical effort, arms and shoulders working against baked-on fat. The water in the washing-up sink is hot, properly hot, and the steam coming off it adds another layer to the kitchen's existing heat. And by this point in the day, your whites are damp at the collar and the small of your back. This is the part nobody thinks about when they think about cooking. The cooking itself is one thing. The physical archaeology of removing the evidence of the cooking. That's the other half. Less visible, less romantic, but equally demanding. You work. Your arms work. Your back works. The muscle on your right shoulder that's been slightly wrong since you strained it carrying a pot wrong in the summer. That works too, reluctantly, accompanied by its usual low-level commentary. By 2:30, the kitchen is clean. Mrs. Hartley stands at the end of the preparation table and looks at it the way she looks at everything, as information, registering what's been used up. what needs to be replenished before tomorrow, running the calculation. Agnes. Yes. Tomorrow we have the ministry inspection. A different kind of attention arrives in your body, something that is not quite anxiety but contains it. The Ministry of Food sends inspectors. They check quantities, preparation methods, hygiene standards, compliance with the restriction orders that govern what can and cannot be served. They are not unfriendly. The ones who've come before have been, if anything, quite respectful of what's being done here. But they are precise, and the paperwork that attends their visits is significant, and there are several records that need to be in order before tomorrow morning. The quantities book, you ask? That and the ingredient sourcing log, the delivery records from the past month, the portion weight records. The portion weight records from last Thursday are incomplete. A pause. I know. I can... You begin. Yes, she says, before you go tonight. The portion weight records are a ministry requirement. Every day you're supposed to weigh a sample of 3 portions at service and record them to demonstrate compliance with the guidelines that prevent underportioning. Mrs. Hartley is rigorous about this. Last Thursday the weighing happened, but the writing down didn't, because last Thursday was the Thursday when the roof over the storage area decided to leak in a way that required immediate attention, and in the chaos of responding to that, the record was never completed. This is not a crisis. The portions were correct. The problem is the piece of paper. You get the logbook and sit at the small desk in the corner Mrs. Hartley uses for administrative work. The desk is organised with the same compressed efficiency as everything else in her world. The logbooks in their specific order, the correspondence in its folder, the notes she makes to herself in handwriting so small and precise, it looks designed to take up as little space as possible. You fill in the missing records. The numbers are approximately right. You remember what you weighed that morning, and you round carefully but honestly, the way Mrs. Hartley has taught you to do official documentation. Then you sit for a moment. The kitchen is quiet. The afternoon shift is starting tea preparation, but they're in the dining room, not here. The stock pot rested is going again for tomorrow. The sound of it, the low murmur of water at near boiling, the occasional pop as a bubble breaks the surface, is the closest this kitchen gets to silence. Your hands are resting on the desk. Your right shoulder is aching in its specific, familiar way. Your feet are telling you that the floor is very hard and has been very hard for 8 hours. But the inspection records are complete, and 400 people ate today. The first alert sounds at 4:20. You know the sound. Everyone in London knows the sound. The rising wail of the air raid siren, that mechanical keening that starts low and climbs, the sound that has been woven into the city's nervous system for 3 years. The sound that your body responds to before your brain has finished processing what it is. Your stomach drops. The kitchen staff responds automatically, the way they've been trained. The fire is reduced. Burners turned down but not off, because a fire left unattended is a different kind of danger. The cooking that can be paused is paused. The cooking that can't be is managed from a position of readiness to move. Mrs. Hartley appears at the kitchen door. Down. One word. Down. To the shelter beneath the building. A reinforced basement that used to be storage, that now has benches and a first aid kit and an air that smells of damp stone and old cardboard. You go. The shelter is already half full when you get there. The afternoon service staff, the women from the administrative office upstairs, 2 delivery men who are caught mid-drop. You squeeze onto the bench. your shoulder against Phyllis on one side, Joan on the other. The sound of the siren is muffled down here, but still present, still doing its work on your nervous system. Then it fades, and what follows the siren's end is a different kind of sound, the sound you've learned to categorise in your time in London, because it turns out there is a whole taxonomy of sound during an air raid, and knowing which category you're in matters enormously. Distant, that's the first assessment. You listen. The guns are active. The ack of the anti-aircraft batteries, a sound that has something in it that could be confused with celebration if you heard it without context. And then, beneath the guns, a deeper sound. Not close, but not very far. Joan is sitting with her hands folded in her lap, looking at the floor with the focused attention of someone reading something invisible. "South," she says quietly. "Southwark or further." You don't answer. You're listening. The deeper sound again. And then another. And then a pause. You know the pause. Everyone knows the pause. The pause is when you breathe. 40 minutes in the shelter. 40 minutes is long enough for your body to move through the whole sequence. The initial jolt of adrenaline, the hyper-attention, the period of genuine terror during the sounds, the gradual descent from terror into something that is just endurance, just waiting, just the particular patience of people who have done this before and know that it ends. Phyllis, sitting beside you, is knitting. She brought her knitting to the shelter. She brings it every time. It's a sock in grey wool, one of the socks for soldiers drives. Her needles click against each other in a small rhythmic sound that is, you've decided, either the most calming or the most absurd thing in the world. You haven't made up your mind. The woman from the administrative office, her name is Margaret, mid-40s, handles the Ministry of Food correspondence, has a book, she's reading it, or at least she's holding it, and her eyes are on the page, which might be the same thing. You have nothing. You didn't think to bring anything. You're sitting in a damp basement with your hands between your knees, listening to the sounds above you diminish. Joan is still looking at the floor. "You all right?" you say, keeping your voice low. She looks up. "I'm always all right," she says. "It's just..." And she stops. "I know," you say. She looks at you. "Do you?" And honestly, yes, you do know. You know the particular quality of 40 minutes in a shelter, the combination of fear and tedium that is stranger in its way than pure fear would be. You know the way a raid sounds when it's not you, when the damage is happening to someone else's street while you're underground, and the guilt that comes with the relief of realizing it. You know the way your hands look in the shelter's low light, the cuts from the peeling, the roughness of the skin, the slight discoloration around the knuckle of your right thumb where you scalded it in August and it's been very slightly wrong ever since. You know the way London sounds when the all clear comes, the long steady note, not the wail of the warning which rises and falls, but the all clear, which holds a single pitch and means you can breathe again. You wait for it. When it comes, the women in the shelter do not cheer. Nobody cheers the all clear in 1943. The novelty of survival wore off sometime in 1941. What they do instead is stand up, gather their things, begin the practical process of returning to wherever they were before. Phyllis puts her knitting away. Margaret puts her book away. The delivery men, who've been sitting in the corner with the particular discomfort of outsiders, retrieve their caps. Mrs. Hartley's already standing at the shelter door, looking upward as if she can see through the floor above her to the sky. "Right," she says. And that's it. That's the all clear. Right, back to work. The kitchen is waiting and the tea service is 40 minutes late, and there's a draft from the door at the top of the stairs, which means either the door has been left open or something happened to the door. Something happened to the door. The damage to the building is minor. This is the word people use for structural damage to a place they're still inside. Minor. The blast from something that hit 2 streets away. You'll learn later it was a pair of bombs intended for the rail line that missed and found a pub and a row of houses instead, caught the corner of the building at an angle that was enough to crack the plasterwork on the upper floor and to do something definitive to the door at the top of the shelter stairs, but not enough to compromise the structure. Minor. Mrs. Hartley has the phrase for this too. We're standing, she says, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, examining the fine white plaster dust that has settled over the preparation tables like snow. The building's standing. That's what counts. It is what counts. You get a cloth and begin clearing the plaster dust from the surfaces. The work is familiar and oddly calming, restoring order to a disrupted surface, the way you've been doing since 6 this morning. The ranges are still warm. The stock pot with its lid is untouched. The pudding tins retrieved before the alert are stacked neatly where you left them. Phyllis goes straight to the stock pot and lifts the lid. Looks, nods. Still good? She says. Still good. You keep clearing. Later, after the tea service, which is compressed into 40 minutes and serves fewer people than usual, because half the regular crowd has been elsewhere or occupied or waiting things out, you find yourself in the back hallway, arms full of the folded clean cloths from the laundry delivery, and you stop. The hallway has a window, a narrow window, north-facing, looking out onto the garden. In the garden, the herbs, battered by October but still there, the rosemary still grey-green and aromatic, the thyme reduced to woody stems with a few surviving leaves. Beyond the garden, the buildings of the street beyond, and beyond those, at this angle and in this light, the grey of late afternoon, the sky that particular post-raid colour of washed pewter. You can just see the curve of something above the nearest roof line. The dome. Still there. You stand with the clean cloths in your arms and look at it for a second. Just a second. The dome, pale and enormous, unchanged. Then you hear Mrs. Hartley's voice from the kitchen and you get moving. At 5:15, when the work is winding down toward the end of your shift, Mrs. Hartley does something unexpected. Agnes, she says, you're on the roof watch tonight. You blink. The fire watcher. 11 to 2. Henson can't come in. His mother's been hit. Henson is one of the regular fire watchers, a middle-aged man who works in accounts somewhere and does the overnight watch twice a week. His mother, you've heard about his mother, without details, the way you hear about people's disasters in fragments around the edges of working days. Is she? He said she's alive. The house is not. Mrs. Hartley's voice carries the flatness of someone who has been receiving this kind of information for 3 years and has learned to work around it without pretending it doesn't matter. Tonight's watch is 11 to 2. Up the back stairs there's equipment. Bucket of sand, bucket of water. You know what to watch for. You do know what to watch for. Fire, a dropped incendiary, or a spark from another fire travelling on the wind, landing on the roof. A flicker of flame in a window of the adjacent building. You know what to do. Report it. If the telephone works, and if not, use the hand pump and the sand and the water and try not to die. You've never done a watch before, but you've been here long enough that they trust you with it, and being trusted with the watches. You feel this. underneath the tiredness and the residual shakiness from the afternoon's events. A real thing. "Thank you," you say. Mrs. Hartley looks at you with the expression that isn't quite a smile. "Don't thank me. You won't be sleeping much." By 6, the kitchen is closed. The evening, the long gap between the end of your shift and the start of the watch, is yours. You go back to the lodgings. You wash properly, using the water that's barely above lukewarm, with a small amount of soap you've allowed yourself this week. You eat the supper Mabel has put together. She's on evenings at the munitions factory, works strange hours, was home this afternoon. Bread and something from a tin, a vegetable soup that is nothing like the restaurants but is hot and simple and enough. Mabel is knitting too, same as Phyllis, same as what feels like every woman in London, the sock drive. She knits fast, not looking at her hands, watching out of the window at the street with the absent gaze of someone used to occupying their hands while their mind is elsewhere. "You all right?" she says. "You look pale. Raid this afternoon." "I heard it. From the factory floor." A pause. "Anyone hurt round here?" "2 streets away. A pub and some houses." She nods, knits. "Did you get anything in?" "Terry's parsnips. Good ones." She smiles at this. "Your mother would not recognise you." "I know. She'd be proud of you, though." You look at your hands, the cuts from the peeling, the scalded knuckle. "Would she?" "Yes," Mabel says, and goes back to her knitting. You sleep until 10, a heavy black sleep that comes on like something switched off. No dreaming, just darkness, and then suddenly the alarm, and then cold, and the process of getting dressed in the dark, the familiar inventory of what's where. At 10:30, you're back at the restaurant. The back stairs are narrow and smell of the same damp plaster as the rest of the building, amplified. You go up with a torch, shielded, angled downward. The rule about light in the blackout applies to you as much as anyone, and push through the roof door. The cold hits you immediately. London cold, October, nearly midnight, from a height. The wind off the river, which is different up here, uninterrupted by the streets, moving cleanly across the rooftop with a force that isn't violent, but is comprehensive. It gets everywhere, into the spaces between your scarf and your coat, into the gap between your hat and your collar. You find the chair, a wooden kitchen chair someone's cast off, placed near the low parapet, and the equipment, the bucket of sand, the bucket of water, the hand pump and a logbook, a pencil, and, carefully, because someone has left it here in a tin, a thermos of tea. You could kiss whoever left the thermos. You pour a cup. The tea is strong and the milk in it is proper milk, not the powdered kind, and someone has added half a spoon of sugar to the thermos, and you're so tired and so cold that the sweetness is almost unbearably welcome. You sit in the chair. You look at London. There are no words adequate to London at night from a rooftop in the blackout. You know this. You've been told this by people who've done fire watching before, that there's a particular quality to it. But knowing a thing and experiencing it are different categories, and you are not prepared. The blackout means no lights, not a single house light, not a street lamp, not the advertisement boards, the shop windows, the restaurant glow, and the theatre crowds and the river bridges lit like strings of amber. None of it. Just darkness. But not complete darkness. The city makes its own dim light. The moon, nearly full tonight, which is, you know, a bomber's moon. The reason there was a raid this afternoon. The moon catches the river, makes it silver. Catches the dome of St. Paul's, visible from here in its entirety, the pale stone giving back the cold light with a softness that doesn't seem structural, doesn't seem like stone, but feels like something emanating. And beyond it, south, east, west, the city spreads. Darkness interrupted by the occasional slip of light from a poorly sealed blackout curtain, a brief orange glow from somewhere, quickly extinguished. The shapes of buildings visible not by their light, but by their silhouette, their displacement of the sky, the city breathing, because it is. You can feel it, or rather, you can hear it. Even now, even at nearly midnight, London does not stop completely. There are sounds, distant traffic, a train somewhere east, the sound of the river if you listen past the closer sounds. The machinery of a city that has not been sleeping well for 3 years but has refused, absolutely refused to stop. You think about the soldier from lunch, the way he sat with his hands flat on the table. The train from Waterloo at 3, Jones guess. Whether he made it onto the train, whether he's somewhere on a troop ship right now in the dark, listening to different sounds. You think about the families on the 2 streets that took the bombs today. Someone's going through that tonight. Right now, somewhere south of where you're sitting, someone is doing what people do after the raid. The sifting through rubble, the accounting for the people in the house, the discovering of what's left and what isn't. You think about Henson's mother, alive. The house is not. You pull your coat tighter. The thermos is warm in your hands. 11 o'clock. You look at the log. You write 2300. Conditions clear. Moon full. No visible fire or smoke. And then you look up again at the dome, because you find yourself orienting by it, the way sailors use stars. 300 years old, near enough, built in 1710, completed after 35 years of building, Christopher Wren. You know this. You know it the way you know a few things about London's bones, absorbed in your time here, picked up in fragments from the newspapers and the conversations and the way people talk about the city they were born in. 300 years of Londoners under that dome. 300 years of Sunday services and state funerals and weddings and the small transactions of faith that happen in large buildings without announcement. Wren himself buried in the floor. You know that too, the famous epitaph on his monument. If you seek his memorial, look around you. You look around you. This is his memorial, the dome in the moonlight and the city still breathing around it, and you on a rooftop with a bucket of sand and a thermos of tea, watching for fire. Midnight. You've been up here an hour and your feet, despite the chair, are telling you about it. You stamp them periodically, the way you'd stamp in a queue, the simple action of moving blood through tissue that's been still too long in the cold. The sound of your boots on the roofing felt is the main sound up here now, punctuating the deeper quiet. You write 0, 0, 0, 0. No activity. Moon obscured intermittently by cloud. The moon is doing something complicated with the clouds tonight, moving in and out of them. When it's in, London in silver and black, the dome clear, the river silver, the shapes of buildings precise. When it's out, a different London, darker and softer, the shapes gone indistinct, the distances uncertain. In the darker moments you think about home, about Harrogate, about the particular smell of the house, not a smell you ever consciously noticed until you left, and realised you'd been carrying it all along. Coal smoke and wool and something floral from your mother's soap, and the underlying smell of a house that has been lived in by the same family for 20 years. A smell you don't have a word for, but which means safety. You don't feel homesick exactly. You haven't felt homesick for several months. What you feel when you think about home is something more complex. an awareness that you are not the same person who left it, and that this is simultaneously right and strange, and that the distance between who you are becoming and who you were before isn't in miles. You came here for a job, or you came here because there was nothing else to do in Harrogate. That wasn't, not exactly nothing, but you came here because the world outside Harrogate was moving fast and loudly, and you felt, in a way you couldn't have articulated at the time, that you needed to be moving with it, or you'd be left behind by something important. That the war, which was terrible, was also the thing that was happening, and you needed to be where things were happening. You're where things are happening. The dome in the moonlight, the soup that was really good, the ration book arithmetic that runs on its own rails in your head, the feel of pastry dough coming together under your hands. You are learning something here. Not just cooking, something else. Something about the distance between what people need and what people want, and about the skill of closing that gap even when the materials are almost nothing. Something about the value of the reliable thing, the hot meal that's there. Every single day it'll reach 12:30. You're standing now. The chair has defeated you, the cold defeating the chair, your body requiring movement to stay warm. You pace the length of the rooftop parapet, 10 steps one way, 10 steps back, the way a fire watcher at sea might walk a deck watch, the functional pacing of someone who must stay awake by keeping their body in motion. The city is at its quietest, not silent, never silent, but closest to it. You find yourself thinking, oddly, about the parsnips. The good parsnips that Terry sold you this morning. The way the best of them, when you cut through the flesh, have a fine texture that holds its structure in the oven, that doesn't collapse into softness but browns at the edges and stays firm in the centre. The way they absorb the fat in the roasting pan, the small, precious amount of dripping, and become something more than a root vegetable. 400 people ate those parsnips today. 400 people stood in a queue in the October cold and came into a warm room and sat at a bare table, and a plate was put in front of them, and on that plate were parsnips that you roasted this morning with your own hands. And the soldier who sat in the corner with his hands flat on the table ate them too, and he ate Phyllis's soup made from yesterday's bones. And then he put his cap on and buttoned his coat and went to wherever he was going. You don't know his name, you won't know his name, but you know the soup was good. 1 o'clock, you write, 1 o'clock, clear, no activity. The moon is fully out now, the clouds having migrated south over the last half hour, and London below you is precisely itself, the river silver black, the dome ivory, the streets dark ribbons between the darker shapes of buildings. You're tired. Your body is running on the particular energy of exhaustion past a certain point, the second wind territory, where the tiredness itself seems to become a kind of clarity, where the normal noise of consciousness quiets, and what's left is just the immediate. What's immediate? The cold, the roof under your feet, the bucket of sand, the thermos, empty now, the last cup finished 20 minutes ago and keenly missed, the logbook, the pencil, the city. You think about what Mrs. Hartley said once on a quiet Wednesday in the kitchen's rare afternoon stillness, when it was just the two of you and the stock pot and the distant sound of a cart in the street. She didn't say it to you exactly. She said it to the kitchen, to the room, the way people sometimes say things out loud that they've been thinking privately and have reached the point of needing to hear in air. I used to think, she said, that the war would feel like something bigger, more dramatic. I thought I'd know when the important things were happening. She was silent for a moment. But it just feels like cooking. Every day, just cooking. And I don't know if that's because the cooking is small or because the cooking is everything. You thought about this for days afterward. You're still thinking about it. The cooking is everything. 400 people upright and moving. Soup that was really good. Bones that gave up something decent. That's not small. 1:45. In 15 minutes, the next watch arrives. You know him. A man named Collins who does the 2 to 5, a retired schoolteacher who is apparently indefatigable and arrives to every watch exactly on time, with biscuits, which has made him universally beloved among the fire watchers. You are very ready for Collins and his biscuits. But first, 15 more minutes of London. You stand at the parapet and look south. From here you can trace the shape of the raid's damage, or at least the shape of where it isn't. The street 2 blocks away where no light shows not because of blackout compliance, but because there are no windows left to show light through. The gap in the roof line, visible now against the slightly lighter sky, that wasn't there this morning. 2 streets over. 2 streets could be the difference between standing here with a thermos and being underneath what those people are underneath right now. Or it could be 3 blocks. Or it could be the corner of your own building. There is no system to it, no selection by merit or importance. The physics of the blast is purely physical. It goes where it goes. You have thought about this. Everyone who stays in London thinks about this. And the conclusion, which is not a comfortable conclusion but is the only honest one, is you're here. You're standing. The building is standing. That's what counts. Mrs. Hartley's arithmetic. The arithmetic of survival. You're warm enough, tired enough, alive enough. That's enough. Collins arrives at 1:58. He has biscuits, digestives, slightly broken, in a tin that's been through several wars of its own. Quiet? He asks, already scanning the horizon with the habitual sweep of an experienced watcher. One small glow to the east, around midnight. Gone in 30 seconds. Probably a chimney. I'll keep an eye on that area. He takes your logbook and reviews your entries. Nods. Good. Go sleep. You take a biscuit. The best biscuit you've ever eaten. A biscuit made of pure context. The context of 3 hours in the cold and exhaustion and relief. And you go down the stairs. Back at the lodgings at 2:10. The house is dark and quiet. Joan is asleep. You can hear her through the wall, the slow rhythm of someone who's been asleep for hours. Mabel is at the factory. You don't undress fully. Coat off, boots off, everything else on. You are under your blankets in under a minute and then you are somewhere else entirely. The city settles. The raids come and come again, but tonight the sky is quiet. Somewhere south of the river, people are sorting through rubble, looking for photographs and spoons and the everyday objects that become irreplaceable the moment they're buried. Somewhere, Henson is dealing with whatever is left of his mother's house. But here, in this narrow room, in this narrow bed, with the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a hair, it is quiet. You're learning the city. You've been learning it for 8 months, and you're nowhere near finished, and some of what you're learning isn't comfortable. The ration book as weapon, the gaps in the roof line, the way people queue with patience because the alternative to patience is despair, and despair is the one luxury nobody in this city can afford. But also the parsnips that were genuinely good, the stock that gave up something decent, the dome in the moonlight 300 years solid still standing, You are becoming someone new, not the girl from Harrogate, though she's still in here. You can still find her when you look, in the particular way you feel when someone mentions your mother, in the involuntary comparison between Yorkshire cold and London cold. But something new over the top of her, something shaped by this kitchen and this city and Mrs. Hartley's economy of communication, something that can feed 400 people on almost nothing, something that can stand on a roof in the dark and watch for fire and feel, beneath the exhaustion, that this is the right place to be. The days become weeks before you finish noticing their passing. November arrives, and with it a kind of cold that settles into the building and doesn't leave. The kitchen's residual warmth is the only warmth, so you find yourself lingering there even when your shift ends, finding reasons to stay until the kitchen genuinely forces you out. The walk to and from the lodgings becomes a study in personal meteorology. You learn the exact spots where the wind is worst, the corners that shelter you, the route that puts the wind at your back for the longest stretch. The rations change slightly. The margarine allocation goes down. The dried egg allowance goes up, which is not an improvement anyone asked for. But then the monthly sugar allocation, which has been 8 ounces all year, goes up by 2 ounces for a single month because of a policy adjustment nobody fully explains. 10 ounces of sugar for 1 month. This is, in the kitchen, greeted with something close to celebration. Mrs. Hartley does not celebrate openly, but she makes a cake on a Tuesday, a plain sponge using reconstituted dried egg and the extra sugar ration, and she puts it on the service counter for the afternoon tea service with no announcement, no ceremony, just it's there. A real cake. Thin slices, carefully portioned, 1 per person. You watch the counter, people take their slice, they look at it, and then they eat it, and the expression that crosses their faces, not extravagant, not theatrical, just a brief moment of something that is only pleasure, uncomplicated pleasure, the pleasure of sugar and fat and flour combined without ulterior motive. That expression happens 400 times that afternoon. That's what the 2 extra ounces of sugar bought. 400 moments of uncomplicated pleasure, worth more than the arithmetic suggests. December comes, and with it the shortening of the days until the mornings are full dark and the afternoons go grey by 3, and the kitchen is the lightest and warmest place for miles. The Christmas ration. The government, with some understanding of how human beings work, provides a slight increase in certain allocations for December. Extra butter, a small chocolate ration, the possibility, not guaranteed, but possible, of a few oranges through the WVS allocation. Mrs. Hartley plans for Christmas lunch 3 weeks in advance. She does this aloud at the end of the morning meeting, going through what she expects to have and what she intends to do with it, and the planning itself has a quality that you recognise now as one of Mrs. Hartley's more deliberate practices. She plans out loud because the planning is also demonstration, teaching by intention. Here's how you think about a complex problem with limited resources. Here's how you take what you have and make it feel like abundance. The key, she explains, not as a secret but as a fact, is presentation. In a normal restaurant, presentation is aesthetic. The arrangement on the plate, the quality of the crockery, the folded napkin, none of that is available here. The plates are thick institutional white. The service is functional. But presentation in this context means the food arrives hot, which means the serving chain is managed to ensure it never sits long enough to cool. The portions are consistent, which means nobody feels slighted by comparison to the person beside them. The space is clean, which means clean tables and clear floor, which creates, even in an institutional room, a quality of intention. Someone cared about this space. Someone cared about you sitting in it. 400 people on Christmas Day 1943. The food is plain. Braised mutton, a better cut than usual, Mrs. Hartley having worked the supply arrangements for weeks, with roasted potatoes and a sauce that is thicker than the usual gravy because of a careful deployment of flour reserves. A pudding, small but real, made with actual dried fruit, the Christmas allocation, and suet and a tablespoon of the extra butter. Not a pre-war Christmas, not the Christmases these people remember, or that they'll tell their children about someday. But it is warm, it is hot, it is served with care, and the queue stretches on Christmas morning past the church and around the corner, because some of them have nowhere else to go, because for some of them this is the meal. January and the cold reaches a different register, the kind of cold that makes the kitchen windows opaque with the differential between inside and outside. Great panels of condensation running down the glass and pooling on the sills, where it freezes overnight if the kitchen goes cold and has to be dealt with in the morning. Your hands crack. Not badly, but persistently. The knuckles, where the skin goes from the heat of the kitchen to the cold outside and back again, a dozen times a day, the skin protesting this treatment. You use the small amount of hand cream you allow yourself at night, but it's fighting a losing battle against the environment. Mrs. Hartley notices. Barrier cream, she says one morning, producing a small tin from her apron pocket. On the knuckles before you go outside, not a luxury. You take the tin. The cream inside is yellowish, practical smelling. Not pleasant, but effective. You put some on your cracked knuckles and feel the immediate difference. The way the protective layer between skin and weather functions exactly as described. Thank you. Cracked hands become infected hands, she says, and infected hands stop working. This kitchen needs your hands working. This is, you've come to understand how Mrs. Hartley expresses care, not through softness, but through the practical removal of obstacles to function. Not, I've noticed your hands hurt, but here is the specific solution to the specific problem, because the problem is practical, and so is the solution. You love her for it, in the particular way you can love someone who will never use the word. February brings a new girl. Her name is Dorothy, ironic, given Mrs. Hartley's name, and the two of them navigate the shared name with a careful avoidance that is almost comical. She's 17, from Somerset, arrived on a Tuesday with a letter not unlike the one you arrived with. She stands in the kitchen on her first morning looking at everything with the exact expression you remember looking at everything with. The expression of someone whose brain is receiving more information than it can fully process. You show her the knife grip Mrs. Hartley showed you. You show her the potato peeling rhythm. You tell her about the cracked knuckles and the barrier cream. It gets easier, you say, which is the sentence you told yourself when you arrived and didn't believe, and now know to be true. She doesn't believe you either. She will. In March, a letter from your mother. Your mother writes in the way she does everything, with careful economy, the handwriting clear and unhurried, the content selected for its relevance. She doesn't write about feelings directly. She writes about facts that contain feelings. She writes, "Your father asks after you every week. I've stopped telling him you're in a kitchen because he worries more about kitchens than he would about, say, an office." She writes, Mrs. Pickard's son is home from North Africa. He's very thin, but he's home. She writes, I made a cake for the W.I. Bake sale. You would have been better at it than I was. Your pastry was always better. This last line stops you for a moment, sitting at the kitchen desk with the logbook in front of you and Mrs. Hartley's small precise notes visible beside your own. Your pastry was always better. She has never said this before. She is not, as you've established, a person who praises directly. This is as close as it comes from your mother, across however many miles and months of distance. Your pastry was always better. You fold the letter and put it in your pocket and go back to the kitchen. But you carry it all day. One Sunday in April, the rare Sunday when the inspection schedule means someone must be on maintenance, and Mrs. Hartley has organised it so that you, who have never had a full Sunday free in 8 months, get the afternoon entirely to yourself. You go to the river, not to the market, not on an errand, just to the river, because it's a clear day for April, the kind of clear that makes London look like something from a painting, and because you've been inside a kitchen for 8 months and your body has been persistently, quietly requesting open air for most of that time. You walk south to the embankment and stand looking across the Thames. The river is high. April rain upstream has brought it up, and the current runs fast and brown against the embankment wall, the slap and suck of water against stone audible even through the ambient city noise. Barges move in both directions, heavy laden, the waterman navigating the current with practised ease, and on the other side, London. St. Paul's is directly across, closer from here than from the restaurant, visible in a way that is different from the rooftop view, where you see it from above the surrounding streets. From here you see it as someone approaching it would, rising from the city, the dome dominating the skyline. Behind it, to the east, the City of London, the Old Square Mile, the financial heart, the area that took the worst of the Blitz in those early winters. You can see the gaps from here, places where the skyline is interrupted, spaces where buildings used to be, but St. Paul's. You think about the letters from Wren. There's a story. You read it in a newspaper article someone had left in the shelter, about the night of the Great Fire Raid in December 1940. Wren had died 200 years before. His cathedral stood, and when the smoke cleared, it was there. If you seek his memorial, look around you. You look. The river, the barges, the damaged skyline with its intact dome, the clear April sky above London. This is what 8 months in a kitchen looks like from outside it. A city that is battered and tired and still going. 400 people every day, upright and moving, because someone makes the soup. You stay by the river for an hour. The sun moves, the barges move. Somewhere behind you, a bus goes past on the embankment road, its engine a familiar London sound. You're 19, and you're almost 20. And you've been here long enough to know this city's rhythms the way you know the rhythms of the kitchen. You will stay. You don't know for how long. The war won't last forever. There's something in the news every week that suggests the tide, though it comes slowly, is coming. But you will stay. Not because you plan to, because the staying has made something real. Because the kitchen has become, in the way that happens with places you've worked in thoroughly, more yours than anywhere else. Because there is more to learn. Because it'll reach. It happens on a Tuesday in late autumn, November 1943. And the way it happens is quiet rather than dramatic. The way most real things happen. You're at the desk after service, finishing the week's ordering for Mrs. Hartley. The wireless is on in the dining room. It's kept on through the day now. The BBC Home Service, news and music and the particular rhythms of wartime broadcasting. And from the kitchen, you've been half listening to it all afternoon the way you half listen to traffic. And then you hear it. Not the headline. You don't catch the headline. What you catch is the tone. The newsreader's voice doing something slightly different. Not the controlled urgency of a raid report or the careful flatness of casualty numbers, but something that is, very quietly, positive. The shape of good news delivered with the BBC's characteristic restraint. You stop writing. You walk to the dining room door. The volunteer who's stacking chairs has stopped stacking. The wireless is saying something about North Africa, about Allied progress, about a change in the strategic position. The words are careful, but the direction of them is clear, and you stand in the doorway and listen to the direction. Margaret from the administrative office comes to stand beside you. You don't say anything to each other, you listen. When the bulletin ends, Margaret says, "Well?" "Yes," you say, and that's it. You both go back to what you were doing because there is still ordering to finish and chairs to stack, but something has shifted somewhere beneath the surface, like the first day in late February when the temperature goes up by 3 degrees, and you can't exactly say the cold is over, but your body knows the direction has changed. The direction has changed. It's that real. A Friday evening in December, near the end of your shift, after the last customer has gone and the tables have been cleared and the stock pot is going for tomorrow, Mrs. Hartley asks you to stay for a moment. You stay. She sits at her desk, actually sits, which she rarely does during working hours, and looks at the logbook for a moment, then at you. "January the 1st, she says. "Yes?" "You'll have your 2nd year here." "I suppose so." A pause. "I want to talk about what comes after." This is not a sentence she has used before. In your 14 months in this kitchen, Mrs. Hartley has lived entirely in the present tense. What she has never done is project. "After," you say. "This kitchen won't run like this forever. The war will end. Not soon, but it will. The restaurants will close or change. The rationing will ease. Eventually." She looks at the logbook again. "What I'm saying is, you're good enough to work in a proper restaurant." A pause. "A real kitchen. Not institutional. One with proper ingredients and proper menus and customers who are choosing to be there rather than queuing because they have to be." You look at her. "You've got good instincts," she says. "Better than they should be for your time in. You taste correctly. You manage a service well. You know what food needs before it tells you. The rest is refinement, and refinement comes with time." She looks at you with the full weight of her attention, the attention she usually directs at the logbook or the ingredients or the training of a new knife technique, now directed at you, and it is, you discover, significant. "I'm going to write you a letter," she says. "When the time comes, you should take it seriously." There is a silence in the kitchen of the kind that means something real has been said, and both parties know it, and neither is going to dilute it with excess words. "Thank you," you say, finally. She nods once. "Now go home. You're on early tomorrow." A night in spring 1944. You've been here for 20 months. The kitchen knows you. Not as a building. You don't believe in buildings knowing people. But as a place that you have moved through so completely, so repeatedly, that your body carries its layout in muscle memory. You know the hotspot on range 3 without thinking about it. You know the sound the stockpot makes when it's exactly right. Your hands find the knife and the peeler and the braising pot handle without looking, without deciding. This is what the kitchen has given you. The particular competence of doing something so much that the thinking falls away, and what's left is just the doing. It is, you have decided, one of the better things that can happen to a person. Tonight is a night in April, clear, warmer than it's been, and you are back on the rooftop after a late duty. Not fire watching this time, just a maintenance thing that ran late and left you on the roof at 10 in the evening with a thermos someone remembered to leave and the dome in the moonlight below you. The same dome. The same moonlight. But different too. Different. Because you have 20 months of this city in your body now. 20 months of early mornings and stock pots and ration book arithmetic and air raid shelters and the queue that stretches around the corner every single day. Different because you know what a parsnip weighs and what good bones smell like in the pot, and how to tell the difference between a customer who needs the soup and a customer who needs the soup and someone to set it in front of them as if it matters. Different because of the soldier whose name you never knew. Different because of Mrs. Hartley's letter that you haven't received yet but will. Different because somewhere in the past 20 months, the girl from Harrogate made her peace with London, and London made its peace with her, and what exists now in the space between them is something that doesn't need a name. You think about the people sleeping below you, the lodgings house, 4 streets away. Joan, who takes slightly more than her share of the milk every morning, who noticed the soldier before you did, who has a mother in Bristol and a brother in the Navy, and who makes the best cheese sauce you've ever had, technically, with dried cheese and powdered milk and not a single ingredient that was in it before the war. Mabel, who knits for soldiers and works nights and has hands that are always slightly warmer than they should be, which she says is a medical condition, and which is simply a characteristic of Mabel. The restaurant itself dark and locked, the stock pot cooling slowly toward tomorrow, the preparation tables wiped clean, the logbook closed on its week. Terry at the market, who is probably asleep by now, Bernard the butcher, Collins the fire watcher, somewhere on another rooftop with his biscuits, Mrs. Hartley in her house on the next street, which is not, you've learned, so different from your own lodgings. A single woman's house, 2 rooms and a small kitchen and a garden that's been given over to vegetables and herbs. A quiet house kept with the same compressed efficiency as everything else she does. The photograph on the desk, the man in the shirt sleeves squinting at the sun. 400 people tomorrow, upright as moving. The dome in the moonlight, unchanged. Your watch ends. Collins arrives. On time, with biscuits. The reliability of him by now a kind of comfort. And you go down. In the lodgings, your room is dark. Joan is asleep. The water stain on the ceiling, shaped like a hair, is invisible in this light, but you know where it is. You take off your coat and your boots and your heavier cardigan. You lie down. The city continues outside. It always continues. The traffic, reduced but not gone. The distant trains. The occasional voice from the street below. The sound of the river if you know how to listen past the closer sounds. And underneath all of it, if you're still enough, your own breathing. The rhythm that has been going on without your attention for 20 years. The breath you've drawn standing at the window watching the milkman's horse. The breath in the shelter, measured and slow, Phyllis knitting beside you. The breath on the rooftop, cold and clean. The breath that pulls in the kitchen smell, grease and vegetables and stock, and something that is specifically and irreducibly this kitchen, this building, this place, and gives it back as something quieter. You think, last thing, about the soup. The stock made from bones, 12 hours of slow heat, salt and a bay leaf. 400 people tomorrow who will stand in a queue in whatever weather and come in out of it and sit down, and a bowl will be put in front of them. It'll reach. It always reaches. The sounds outside go on. But you're going somewhere else now. Somewhere that doesn't smell of the kitchen and the blackout and the damp plaster. Somewhere without the ration book arithmetic running on its background rails. Just rest. Just the long, unhurried drift of someone who's been upright since 6 in the morning and has been given permission at last to stop. Let the city go on without you for a while. It will. It's good at that. Let the morning come when it comes, which it will, which it always does. The alarm, the cold floor, the first breath of the day before you remember where you are. Let the kitchen be warm when you arrive. Let the stock pot speak, first thing, in its reliable register of water at temperature. Let the potatoes yield to the peeling knife, one by one, the curl of skin falling away. Let the morning be the morning, and let this right now, this quiet, be something you take all the way down with you into the deep part of sleep where the city can't follow. You are warm enough, tired enough, safe enough. You have a roof. This is not a given, as you know. It is never a given, but tonight it is true. And work that matters, and people counting on you, and 20 months of competence built up in your hands like rings in a tree. That's more than enough. That's everything. Outside, London breathes. The night watchmen in their dark coats, the stock pot cooling to tomorrow, the dome above it all 300 years unmoved. Somewhere a train, somewhere a river, somewhere someone else on someone else's roof, watching for fire, keeping the city's slow vigil. But not you, not tonight. Tonight you have done your part. Tonight you have earned this. Close your eyes. Let the sounds go. Let the rest come. The dome will still be there in the morning. The queue will be there in the morning. 400 people upright and moving, and the soup that is genuinely good, and the bones that always give up something decent. And you, behind the counter, handing it across. Right there, every morning it'll reach. Good night.